valid? Am I the right person to talk about identity erasure? Am I the right person to talk about race in general? You know, I'd been brought up in a white family. I was still really unsure of what I believed in, what I stood for.
Hi everyone, I selected Georgina Lawton's book, Raceless, in search of family, identity, and the truth about where I belong for our book club this month. I hope you had a chance to read it. If you haven't read it yet, don't forget to get your copy from Amazon or download it from Audible. In today's episode, I am featuring the interview I had with Georgina. I hope you enjoy the interview. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you would like to see future content. I look forward to our conversation in the comments. Let's remember to keep the comments respectful. I hope you are having a truly wonderful day. Enjoy the interview. What led you to write Raceless? I know about your background and things, but what really made you feel like you needed to tell your story and get it out there to the world?
Few things really. I guess I had this culmination of feelings that had built up over several years, and I'd started to write about my feelings and my thoughts, having grown up in a white family and not known why that was. I'd started to do that in The Guardian, and that was around 2017, 2018. And those articles were about my dad helping me deal with my hair. They're about uncovering the secrets in my family. And they really came at a time when me and my mum were not fully healed. We weren't getting on very well. There was still a lot of anger, a lot of general discord in our family. Obviously, we were still grieving the loss of my dad. And these articles were a way of me helping work out how I felt and really kind of taking control of my life again, because I felt like so much had been out of my control or had been taken from me. So I started writing these articles in The Guardian, and that's kind of what got the attention of agents and publishers. And they said, oh, you should turn this into a book. You should write a full-on book. And I was like, is anyone going to be interested in it? Is my voice valid? Am I the right person to talk about identity erasure? Am I the right person to talk about race in general? You know, I'd been brought up in a white family. I was still really unsure of what I believed in, what I stood for. So those articles, I think, helped me find my voice, and they encouraged me to keep writing. And they also put me in contact with lots of other people around the world who'd had their identities within the home usually kind of destroyed or kept from them, or, you know, had been built around them, which was out of their control as well. I spoke to a lot of adoptees, a lot of people who'd also found out different things from DNA tests, and all of that just gave me the confidence to start putting everything into a book format. Yeah, it was really a question of trying to find my voice and trying to take control of my life and trying to work out what kind of writer I wanted to be and what kind of woman I wanted to be as well.
At what age did you start suspecting you were different from your family?
So I could see that I was different from the age of 5. And in the book, I talk about how that's actually quite normal for children of colour, black children in white families. People start to realise what race is, or not even what race is, but what their difference is from around the age of 5. So I could see that in my family. And then I started to ask questions, but they weren't getting answered. But I was very much aware of my difference at age 5, I would say.
Okay. And what about your friends? Did they ever point it out or bring attention to it?
So I think what I was trying to get across in Raceless was how white my entire upbringing was. And what I learned about white people is that they won't address race unless they have to. And all the kids that I knew in my school were white. My whole street where I lived was white except one family. And in infant school, that's kind of like kindergarten. I remember like a girl saying, oh, if you scratch yourself white, then you can be white like me. And that was kind of my first realization that I really stood out, because I remember having that conversation with her. But then I went to primary school, like middle school, and I kind of had all the same friends, and it just became this story that they had grown up with as well. So they would, you know, always say, oh yeah, Georgina's the one with the white parents. Georgina's the one who doesn't look like her parents. And, you know, you're like 7, 8 years old. So you just believe what, you know, I believe, and I've been told to believe that from my parents. So it kind of just got passed on and passed on and passed on. And by the time I went to secondary school, it was just very much accepted. And I did know more black girls at school at that point, but it still wasn't something that was ever really challenged by them. And I mainly had lots of white friends in my school anyway, and that was just accepted by them because they'd known me since I was, you know, some of them 5 years old. And it was just the story that took hold and the story that became, you know, the foundation to my life, really.
And that's easy to do when you're just used to something. You just never question it, really, right?
I questioned it, and I try to put this across in the book, but it's hard to describe, you know, how frequently I did question it. I would come home from school after being called the M word. I would come home from school after being called, you know, a slur related to Pakistani people. And I would say, am I from Pakistan? Am I black? Like, what am I? And it just wasn't getting answered. And I guess I was doing that from, I guess, the age of 5 to about 15. And then it just kind of, it was already there. The lie had already taken root. I'd already kind of accepted that I wasn't going to get very far with my parents. They would tell me that they loved me. They would tell me that I was cared for. They would tell me that I was their child. But they stopped short of ever describing me as black or ever saying, you know, that my colour had come from anywhere other than this throwback gene that we leaned into. This was some part of the story that we leaned into because my mum was Irish, and we used to say that my genes could be inherited from a distant Portuguese or Spanish ancestor that had kind of come to the west coast of Ireland through the Spanish Armada. That was the story that we kind of leaned into. But beyond that, we didn't really work out, like, how did I end up like this? What ancestor? Like, who looked like me hundreds of years back? And were they this dark? Because I don't know many Spanish people that like be looking this dark. So it didn't make sense, but it was something that I didn't push much further, because that's as far as I got with it. You know, from age 5 to 15, the story didn't really change.
From the book, I can tell you had an amazing father, and he was truly a wonderful father. And I can tell why you love and cherish him so much, because you have one of the best. But do you think he had any idea at all? Did he give you like any signs?
It's difficult. There weren't signs that he wanted to elaborate and talk about it further, but there were signs that he was engaged and aware that he was raising a black daughter. When I talk about the relationship that he had with me and my hair, you know, there aren't many dads, I've realised, that would take the weave, take the needle in hand and sew extra bits of hair into their daughter's hair to save them from going back to the salon because they didn't want to pay the extra 20 quid to have the top up. But he would do that for me. And you know, since writing about that online, I've realised there aren't many men, period, that would do that, black or white. No. But he was there, and he was happy to do it. Right. But that means, like, physically he was engaged with the idea of me having Afro hair and me caring for my Afro hair and how he wanted to help me with that. So he was very aware. He also was a very smart man. You know, he had an economics degree. He used to help me with my homework all the time. So I believe, looking back now, that he was aware. But I don't believe he could fully engage with it beyond, you know, showing me that he loves me. He couldn't actually talk about the reality of our difference because it was too painful. That's what I believe now. And I think in the podcast I speak to, in the book actually I talk about meeting my dad's friend and, you know, me saying to him, did he ever speak about this with you? Because my dad's work colleague had a black wife and mixed race kids, and they all looked a bit like me. But as a child, I didn't really put 2 and 2 together that, you know, we could have the same background. I just thought my family's my family, your family's your family. I really didn't connect the two because I was a kid. But I spoke to my dad's colleague, and he did say, oh, you know, the first time your father brought you into work with us, I think we had sort of a day where you bring your kids into work. And my dad's friend said to him, oh, your daughter's mixed race like my daughter. And my dad just looked to him and said, yeah, sometimes these things happen. And he didn't elaborate and he didn't talk about it further. And my dad's friend was like thinking, oh, is she adopted or was there an affair? But he just couldn't go into it, even with his closest friends. And I've spoken to other people who said he never acknowledged why we were living in the same house as dad and daughter, but we just didn't look alike. It just wasn't spoken about. There was just this unwritten rule, and the silence permeated my dad's colleagues, my family in Ireland, my family in England. And then, of course, all that adult silence, it permeates your life as a child, and you just learn to normalize it, and you learn that there's something wrong with bringing it up, which also means in a way that you think there's something wrong with you. So it was a lot of silence and a lot of heavy weight that was on my shoulders, but it came from the top down and it permeated my whole life, basically.
I know you had some challenges with your mom after the truth came out, but what about prior? Do you consider that you had a good relationship with your mom? Do you think you had a good relationship with her? Or do you always think there was something there that caused her to be distant?
I think I felt like it was always this unspoken distance between us in a way that just didn't exist with my dad, which is really unusual when you think about it, because you might suspect that it could be the other way around. But I think there was a disdain that naturally came from her because I was the baby that she hadn't been expecting. And I guess she was living in fear in a way that every day was another day in which the story might come out. And as I grew up and I grew more curious and I started asking more questions, she must have sort of retreated further into herself. And I think that definitely put a distance between us, because I never felt like there was as much love and understanding and unconditional love as there was with me and my father. So yeah, when we spoke in therapy about that, I think it was really painful for her to even entertain the idea that there was a distance between us because I was Black or because I was the child of an affair. She couldn't even engage with it. She was, in total denial. She said, "That's not true. I love you. I've always loved you." And I said, "Yeah, but I can feel that love is tainted by this silence that you made us all uphold for so many years." And yeah, that was really difficult to discuss and to unravel in therapy. And I knew that that's why our relationship was the way it was, but it was hard for us to really admit that to each other and for her to talk about it and unpack why that was.
What about your relationship with your mom now? I know in the book you talk about the therapy and it was really open. I think it's going to help a lot of people, with understanding this situation, even if it's not a race issue between the parent and child dynamic. I think a lot of people can still relate to that simply because sometimes parents aren't always honest with them. They have a way of keeping secrets. So after the therapy, and now that it's been some years, how do you think your relationship with your mom is now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot better. It had to be, because I was carrying so much anger at the start of the therapy session, and it wasn't conducive to living a happy life, and it wasn't conducive to living content in my identity. Like, I had to let go of some of that anger and move past what I felt had been stolen from me, and move past the anger that I felt even for my dad, because he wasn't around, and he was an amazing father, but also he'd been complicit in the silence a little bit with my mum as well. But all of my anger was directed at my mum because she was the one alive. So it was really, really a tough period when we started going to therapy, and there were times that I would walk out, and there was times that she would walk out, and there's times that there'd be screaming matches and crying and hugs. And week by week we just got to understand each other a bit more, and I had to let go of a lot of my rage, and my mum had to really develop some empathy, because it was really hard for her to understand how her lies had impacted me, because she just saw herself as a mum that had done everything, and the race thing wasn't that big a deal, and she'd done her best. And I had to be like, it's completely dominated my life, like living this lie. You have no idea, but you've never asked and you've never engaged with it, and it's made me ashamed of myself. It's made me not enjoy dating people that look like me. It's made me ashamed of my hair. It's dominated my whole personality, I think, in a way, because I was a lot more defensive when I was a child. If anybody tried to tell me what I was, I'd clap back, and I'd come out with all these pushbacks, because I didn't want anyone to tell me that I wasn't part of my white family. I was like, no, they're my parents. I said I was in complete denial, and the whole lie that I was carrying, I think, shaped a lot of my personality. So I had to really let go of a lot of pain, and I think I've become a lot calmer as a result. I'm just a lot more chilled out, and I accept my mum for what she's done, and I accept her for who she is. And I think today our relationship is a lot stronger, and I can go home for 2 weeks at Christmas, and we're not going to constantly argue about this thing. There was a time when everything used to come back to, "Oh, but you lied to me." It was constant. It was always there. And now I think it's not. Of course, there are days when I wake up and I'm really angry because I still don't know as much as I want to about the part of me that influences how I move through the world. There's still people that don't understand when I tell them that I don't really know the Black side of my heritage, and I still have to live with that every day. But I've learned to compartmentalize it, and I've learned to deal with that, and I've learned to then go and spend time with my mum and not constantly bring it up, because otherwise we wouldn't have a relationship. And I feel like going to therapy has helped me move past that stage where I constantly bring it up. So yeah, the relationship with my mum is a lot better. We have a normal mother-daughter relationship now, and not everything is about that stage of our lives where I was angry.
Have you been able to find out who your biological father is?
No, and when I do, I guess, that could be the next book, or that could be
Oh, definitely.
at least another feature or another article on it. But no, it's something that, yeah, if I think about too much, I can get agitated and irate and upset about, because yeah, it still dominates so much of who I am, just moving through the world, looking the way that I do. I'm living in Lisbon at the minute, and we don't really even use the term biracial in Portugal. It's just, you're just black, you're black or white here. And it's difficult for me to see myself as part of certain black communities when I don't have the knowledge of self that other people do. Like, I'm jealous of so many people that just know a little bit more about their heritage, or know that side of their culture.
Right.
And I've written about knowing of my Nigerian heritage, but it doesn't, it's still difficult to grasp, because all of that knowledge about being Nigerian and all of that pride when it comes to being Nigerian comes from like cultural osmosis, when you're around family members and learning traditions and just learning what it means to be comfortable in a space. And I don't have that, because I've never had really any close relationships with any black relatives. I found a very distant cousin that I wrote about in Raceless, but no one closer, no one that can help me find my biological father. So it's still tough. I think it's something that is going to continue to inform the next part of my journey, and the life that I'm living at the minute. I think it's ongoing, the search.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you about, because in the book you mentioned your distant cousin, and I was going to ask you if you've matched with anyone else, but it sounds like you haven't as of yet.
No other updates, but I'm constantly looking. I get the little alerts from My Heritage and DNA sites, and it says, oh, you've got a new cousin, but it's always an Irish surname. There's plenty of Irish people in the system that are trying to find more about their heritage. And every time I log in, I get excited if I see a name that's not Irish, but it's very, very rare. And when I do find a West African Nigerian surname, I look at the data and it's very distant, a cousin. So there's no one yet. But I live in hope that one day I'm going to get the email and it's going to be like auntie. And then from that, you can find out who the biological parent is. So fingers crossed.
I know you travel the world, and in the book, you talk about all the different cultures of Black people across the world. How do you think they receive you now, knowing that you don't really have the Black experience, meaning that you weren't raised in the culture, but have you been well received by the Black people you've encountered, or has that been a challenge?
I've learned a lot about what it means to be Black around the world and in different spaces. And to me, it's just really reminded me that, there's nothing to be ashamed of if you're Black and you're not in touch with the typical cultural markers that some other Black people might think you should be in touch with. There's no one way to be Black. There's no one way to be biracial. The way that the world is moving and the way that we're mixing as societies, I think it's going to be less and less common to expect people to have certain accents or certain cultural hobbies or certain, expectations. We're going to hold people to less account, which I think is ultimately a good thing. And I've noticed when I'm traveling, at least, there's definitely common threads between diasporic communities, and getting my hair done abroad is one that I write about in the book a lot, and one that makes me feel really proud to look how I do and have the hair that I do. But when I was younger, I was so ashamed to get my hair braided, and it was just something that I shied away from because I thought it would make me look too Black, whatever that even means. And now it's something that I love doing, and whenever I go traveling, I always make a point of getting my hair done in different salons around the world. I'm in Lisbon at the minute, so I've got this done here, and I'm going to Brazil next month, and I'll probably get it done there. And obviously, sometimes it doesn't go well, I'll be honest. Like, people have got different ways of doing things, and you get used to having your hair done the way you like. But overall, I like, I like the common points of connection that we as Black women see with each other when we're traveling. And I think I'm naturally drawn towards other Black women who are traveling the way that I am. And you don't really meet that many. Like, you don't meet a lot of like Black backpackers and Black kind of like solo travelers. So when you do find that community, and I'm trying to build one here in Lisbon in Portugal, it's something that I'm really, really proud to be a part of and really proud to hold on to. And also writing about all these things in the book. I've had so many emails from Black people around the world who have been raised in, non-conventional ways, and they are ashamed of not being Black enough, or ashamed of not knowing certain things that their cousins or their friends do. And I'm just very, very much, I guess, trying to hammer the point home that we're not a monolith, and if you were lied to as a child, or if you had something kept from you, there's always time to catch up. There's always time to establish your identity, how you want to establish it, and there's no one way or one set path to be a Black woman or to be a Black man or whatever it is you are.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's been lovely to see other people connect with me over email and connect with me through the podcast and say that similar things have happened to them, and it's fine. Like, you'll work through it. Therapy's a lifesaver, and we're not a monolith. So that's what I've learned as well.
What do you think you'll tell your children? I know we're jumping the gun. You don't have any, as far as I know, right? You don't have any children. Okay. And you're not married. But what do you think you'll tell your children one day about their identity, your background? Have you thought about that?
I have thought about it. I guess when you're not planning children, you can push it out of your mind. But definitely when I was writing the book, it did dawn on me. And, I was so angry at my mum because I was thinking, well, I wouldn't put my own child through this, so why are you choosing to put me through this? And it was something that I thought of loads when I was grieving. I kept thinking about kids, and I kept thinking about younger versions of me, and I kept seeing little Black girls in the street with white mums and thinking, I hope they're getting what they need, because when I was that age, culturally, I wasn't getting what I needed. And I kept getting flashbacks to all these moments of my childhood and seeing all these kids around in London when I was in a different place. So yeah, it's definitely something that crosses my mind. I don't know what I would tell them. I think I would tell them the truth, first of all.
That would be a good start.
That would be a good start, not to repeat the patterns of my parents. I would tell them the truth. I would tell them, if I had kids with someone that looked like me, that, we know as much as we know, that we know your dad's side and we know my side, but we don't know all the Black relatives on my side, but we know the Irish side and we know the English side. I would just have to start with the truth, and maybe tell them a little bit more about the realities of growing up as a Black person in a white majority country or in a white majority school, because I felt like I was ill-equipped once I did venture off into the world on my own. I was ill-equipped for the ways in which, I guess, racism, discrimination, classism maps itself onto the Black body, no matter who you are, no matter where you're from. And I just was completely ill-equipped for the realities of living in a racially hierarchical world, because I'd been completely sheltered in my community with my parents and my grandparents, and nobody spoke about race, nobody spoke about racism, nobody spoke about what you should do if somebody calls you the N-word. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was just none of that. Yeah. And then I started talking about all this stuff online, and I'd be getting, racist abuse off randoms, and I don't think my mum even fathomed that kind of stuff could happen to me. And that was really painful, because I was thinking, where have you been all my life? This kind of stuff has been going on for 25 years and you haven't been here. So I think with my own children, I would definitely just equip them properly with the tools that they need to go into a white majority world. In a way, I think it was weirdly good for me, because I just had this kind of false sense of confidence as a kid, because I got told, of course you can do anything, of course no one's going to be mean to you, of course racism doesn't exist. My parents just didn't talk about working twice as hard for half as much. That was not a thing, because they were white parents. They lived in a raceless, colourless world. Yes. So that kind of equipped me with this false sense of confidence in a way. And then when I found out everything, it was like, it was really heavy. It was like a lot of my confidence was knocked, and I couldn't work out. I kept thinking, how will people receive me? And of course, they've been receiving me the same way. I've been Black my whole life. I just hadn't been fully cognizant of it.
Right? Yeah, I like that.
It was just a mad experience, because I could see in the mirror that I was a Black woman, but I wasn't fully cognizant of what that meant, even up until, I guess, my early 20s. And then really taking the time to get to know the stereotypes and the difficulties of being a Black person in a white world, that really weighed heavily on me for a long time, I think, even though I'd always existed that way, but I'd just been, hands and ears, not attuned to it, I think, for a large majority of my life. So yeah, that was a roundabout way of saying I'm going to tell my kids the truth and equip them for the realities of a harsher world, I think.
What are the most valuable lessons you think you have learned along the way in this journey?
Yeah, number one, I guess your parents are just people, and they are people that are flawed and people that are human, and they will make mistakes in the same way that when I have kids, I'm sure I will make some mistakes. And mess things up as well. So I learned, my parents aren't infallible, and that they made decisions based on what they thought was the best thing to do at the time. Learning about how my parents didn't talk in their marriage about why they were raising a black child. I thought it was completely bizarre that they'd never sat down and spoken about my mum's affair. They'd never discussed it. But then I learned that they did that to keep the family together, because neither of them could face up to the truth. And they thought, if no one's mentioning it, we'll just keep this family together and do our best. And I understand the decisions in a way. I still think it's mind-blowing, but I understand why they did it. And I grew up in a cohesive two-parent family that was otherwise, untainted by difficulties with money or difficulties with single parents. Or I didn't have that. I had a family unit that was pretty strong, other than this kind of lie in the background. So yeah, I've learned to not make excuses for people, but apply grace and try and empathize with people's decisions and learn about what makes them behave the way they do, because I had to do a lot of that with my parents, thinking about why they did what they did. And yeah, the parents are people. They will mess up, just like you will mess up, just like I will mess up when I have kids. That was one of the biggest lessons that I learned.
What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with their identity, or struggling with how they grew up and it's not matching with, what society sees them as today? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess advice-wise would be to look after yourself before you try and look after the relationships that are impacting your sense of self. Because I think if you're with a family or inside a family that is not able to engage with the damage that they might have done to your identity, if you've been lied to, if you've discovered an affair, your point of discovery is going to be very, very pivotal for you. And it's going to, set you on a path of self-discovery and healing, but it might not do the same for the people around you. And I've spoken to lots of people who have been in similar situations to me, but they haven't had the benefit of going to therapy with their parent. They haven't had the closure. They haven't had the discussions. They haven't had the hours of talking it through like I have managed to get with my mum, because she was open to it and because we could afford a therapist. And lots of people aren't going to be able to do those two things. So you need to focus on yourself and maybe deal with, how you're going to get yourself through this, how you're going to heal before you can force these relationships to come back together. And they might not come back together. Your mum or your dad or your partner might not be the person that you need them to be in this situation. And that is really, really painful and really difficult to accept. But you have to ensure that you as a whole person can function with this knowledge and with this truth. And you're going to have to maybe deal with the reality that they might not be in your life the way that you need them to be, or that you might have to leave them behind, because you're going to go on this journey of healing on your own, and not everybody can be beside you because they might not be willing or able to. So there was a point when I thought I might have to leave my mum behind because we weren't hearing each other in therapy. There were things that I was moving forward with that she just didn't want to hear. She couldn't engage. And there was definitely times when my friends said, do you think you could not have her in your life because you're not moving forward with this and it's causing you more pain? And I did have to consider that for a few months. And then we kind of worked through it, luckily, but that might not be the case for everybody. And I think focusing on yourself first is absolutely key before you can force these other relationships to come back together in your life. And yeah, be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, and surround yourself with people that can empathize with you, because not everybody's going to get it. Some people are going to laugh, some people are going to, to take the piss, as we say. Like, some people are going to be unable to help you heal, and it might just be a source of amusement for them, and you just have to leave them behind as well and take time and be patient with yourself, and read books and speak to other people that have gone through the same thing, because you're not alone. It sounds weird, it sounds odd to not know what your racial identity is, but it's actually a lot more common than you think, so there's nothing to be ashamed of either. I would say listen to the podcasts that I've created, read the books, not just about my experience, but transracial adoptees as well, other
Right.
people that have kind of gone through similar things with DNA testing. There's so many stories out there now, and I think the more that we speak about them, the more that we get to attack shame and stigma that goes with them. And with that,
Yes.
comes a sense of freedom and comes a sense of pride in yourself. When you're no longer ashamed, then no one can tell you anything. Like, I don't care now if somebody trolls me and says, oh, how did she not know she was black? is irrelevant. Like, if you don't get with the program, if you don't understand what I'm saying, that's fine. But I'm comfortable in myself and I'm comfortable in my story enough to own it. But that's taken years. And I would say to these people, be patient with yourself, because there'll come a point where you understand who you are, but you have to just go on that journey alone if no one can support you, and eventually you'll get there.
We want to follow your journey. We're hoping that you will do another book when you're able to write about that.
For sure, there's definitely more books in me, but yeah, it's a process.
Yeah. What is the name of your podcast again, so that we can?
The podcast is called The Secrets in Us, and it's a 5-part Audible documentary. So you have to download Audible, but it's worth it. So download it and then leave a review as well, please. It's so good to help with other readers and other listeners when you leave reviews on Amazon or Goodreads or Audible. So yeah, it's called The Secrets in Us.
Thank you so much, Georgina. I thoroughly enjoyed your book, your story, and I think it's really going to help a lot of people. I appreciate you coming to join with me today and talk about more about your story.
No worries, Trish. Thank you for having me.